Two guys either side of 50 with one dream to achieve middle-aged sporting glory. This is the Missing Links Golf Show. Andy Walker, welcome back to the Missing Links Golf Show. This is a very, very exciting episode.
Yes, it is. I feel like this is one of one of the episodes I've been looking forward to for quite a while because it's again we've had a few times where it's taken a little while to lead up to an episode, and I feel like this has been one of them. Yeah, very much looking forward to it.
Yep, it has. We've got a special guest going to join us this evening. This is a guest that we've been chasing for quite some time. As a matter of fact, it's been a guest that we have referenced in many, many episodes. We could have cut together a montage of the number of times that we have talked about author, coach, mental game guru, podcaster himself as well, the great man Jon Sherman, who's going to join us this evening.
Yes, and look, we've covered it before that that this is, his book, The Four Foundations of Golf, is where I started my pilgrimage. I was going to say journey, but it's a pilgrimage into where I am now, into this phase. So yeah, really looking forward to diving into some of the content of the Four Foundations of Golf, as well as his latest book, The Foundations of Winning Golf. I think sort of going together those two books are a really good foundation for.
Oh, that was just so beautifully done, Andy Walker.
Man of many talents.
Takes me back to, I think it was even episode 1, maybe episode 2, when you described or explained the missing links as the links that are missing.
Yep.
So eloquently put.
Oh, look, it's my strength.
It's nice. It's nice. Anyway, we digress somewhat because, we're not going to spend too much time talking about it before we get him on. We're going to welcome him onto the show in just a moment. But it is very, very exciting because we reached out to Jon, I would say close to 6 months ago, around about the time when he was in the process of launching his book, The Foundations of Winning Golf, which is his second book.
Yep.
As you rightly mentioned. And at that time, he was a very busy man and wasn't able to join us immediately, which is not overly surprising. But he did say, give me a shout in a couple of months and we'll make a time. And he was good to his word. So very excited to get him on the show. I'm very excited to ask a lot of questions about expectations, acceptance, dealing with everything that golf throws at you.
Yes.
So, Andy Walker, why don't we get to it?
Let's do it.
All right. We'll see you on the other side, pilgrims. Jon Sherman, welcome to the Missing Links Golf Show. So excited to have you joining us.
Thanks for having me on. Fair warning to the listeners. It's just after 7 here, so finishing up my morning cup of coffee. If I'm not fully coherent, this is a bit early for me podcasting, but we're on opposite ends of the world, so let's see what happens here.
This is a battle we usually fight. Yeah,
we're usually doing the morning shift, and it's the afternoon for the guys that we have interviewed in North America. Yeah, a bit of a change where it's getting late in the evening and early for you.
I think we'll get through it. Caffeine helps.
Caffeine does amazing things. I think if I remember when we had actually someone that you would know, Sasho McKenzie from the Stack System, we did an interview with him some months ago, and I think Andy Walker, if I remember correctly, we were getting up at something like 5:30 in the morning to do that interview. That's the only time that we could get him. So we appreciate you taking one for the team, Jon, and being the guy to get out of bed early and letting us do it in the evening.
Oh, my son just started middle school here, so we're up at 6 o'clock with him. So the schedule has shifted, so we're good.
It's a familiar story. Look, we know who you are. Andy and I absolutely know who you are. We have read both of your books. We are avid listeners to your podcast series that you do with Adam. But I think let's assume that our pilgrims, our listeners, may not know who you are, because strangely enough, we have some listeners that aren't even golfers, but just get into the story about life and parenting. But assuming that they don't know who you are, that they've come from the moon, you take the floor for your elevator pitch for your, the 5 minute story of who is Jon Sherman, what's he all about, and why on earth have we invited him to come onto this fantastic podcast?
Thank you for having me on, and thanks for all the mentions on the show. Yeah, I'm a golfer just like you guys. So I got the idea almost 10 years ago now that I had a journey through the game that started as a kid who loved it and started competing and felt like I didn't really reach my potential, had a lot of struggles in golf, and I had great times playing when I was growing up, but then I kind of went through an unfortunate period of my life where I just didn't have a great relationship with golf. And I started to fix that later on in life when I turned 30 and had my first kid. And I felt that, well, what if I start writing about my perspective as someone who is kind of figuring the game out? And I had looked across the online golf world at that point. This was 2015. And I just felt that everything had always been about the golf swing, which rightly so. The golf swing is very important. And all game improvement content was about the golf swing. And of course, there were some mental books here and there that had gotten popular, but there wasn't really anything else on how to play the game. And I felt, well, what if I just start communicating from a golfer's perspective and writing about these other topics that I feel are important? So I wrote about that on my website, Practical Golf, for many, many, many years. I wrote hundreds of articles. I don't think a lot of people were paying attention for a long time. I just kind of did it because I enjoyed it. And if a few people read the articles, then I was happy. And eventually that writing kind of turned into, I guess, a philosophy in four topics, which eventually became my book, The Four Foundations of Golf. And that's expectation management, strategy or course management, how to practice effectively, and my version of the mental game. And when, I released the book about 2.5 years ago, I think that when I put it all in one place, that I guess elevated what people thought of my advice and thought it was getting cooler, and other coaches have started doing the same. So, yeah, it's been a fun journey. I've put a lot of content out online. We have our podcast, The Sweet Spot, the two books now, the Foundations of Winning Golf just came out. So yeah, long story short, I'm a player coach. I'm not a swing instructor. I help people from a golfer's perspective. I felt that angle was missing, and that's what I do. I try and relay all the stuff that I'm struggling with. A lot of what I write are reminders to myself and stuff that I'm still struggling with. And whether you're a 20 handicap or a touring professional, I think a lot of other golfers see themselves in it and get some nuggets on how to improve their game and, more importantly, how to enjoy the game more. How's
It's
that?
Yeah, look, I think that expectation management, that first one that you mentioned, I know that's something that I've really struggled with. Well, for a long time. When I was playing to become a professional, I thought I should be going out and playing great every single time I competed. But then, sort of in the last 5 years, when I've been coming back into the game, I still feel like I should be playing. Well, certainly when I started, I felt like I should be playing back when I was practicing playing sort of 4 to 6 hours a day. So reading your book, that was sort of the start of my journey into sort of the modern game, I guess, and really thinking about that expectation management, and also just the enjoyment of the game. It's such an important topic, I think, that for most, or for the average golfer.
Yeah, I think the expectation management, it's anyone who reads my book, most of the feedback is that first section is what sets the table for people making a change in their golf game. And fortunately, a lot of people have written me that, I'm enjoying golf again, and that's obviously music to my ears because I struggled with that myself, and I still hold myself accountable to that. But yeah, I find that the path of least resistance in golf is to be hard on yourself and let your results dictate dictate your enjoyment level. And that's easy to do because we have a score at the end of every hole. We have the
Mm.
score at the end of the round. People don't ask you if you had fun if you played golf. They ask you what you shot. And I think the game draws people who are competitive and like to measure themselves by numbers to it. That's why I was drawn to it. So we're all kind of fighting this battle on letting the results dictate our enjoyment level. And of course, we all want to play well and shoot our lowest scores. But I've found that if you can figure out a way to take the game for what it is and enjoy that, that's a prerequisite for the golfer who wants to get better. I find that if you truly want to get better at this game and lower your handicap, um, it's much easier when you're more forgiving of yourself, more patient with yourself, and you're placing your emphasis on things that are more within your control rather than the variability of scoring. And that enjoyment, that fun, that passion for the game, I believe makes it easier to shoot lower scores in the end.
Mm.
It's a really good point. The expectation thing and the acceptance point, which I'm sure we'll talk a bit more about in greater detail. But the expectation point, I remember having a couple of conversations shortly after I had read your first book before Foundations and sort of had one of many epiphanies during the reading of that book. I was out on the course with one of my mates, and he was talking about expectations, and he was sort of playing mid to low teens handicap at the time, and not practicing as much as he wanted to, not playing as often as he wanted to. And his comment was, "Oh, I just need to lower my expectations. I shouldn't expect to shoot my handicap. I should just be happy with 15 or 20 over par and just change my expectations." But what I took out of the chapter in the book that was referring to expectation management, actually, it wasn't so much just about the score. It was about the outcome of each shot and talking about, really understanding if I'm 150 meters out in the fairway, what is a good shot? Should I be expecting to hit it to 3 feet? Should I be, obviously not. Should I be expecting to hit the green, or should I be actually just celebrating the fact that I've put it somewhere around the green and given myself a makeable chip and a chance for an up and down? And I thought that reframed things really well. And it also really helped when you link it into the last chapter around course management about the decision making based on honest expectations of the shot that you might actually be able to play. I don't know if I've explained that brilliantly, so I'd probably rather hear it in your words, but that was a takeout
Well,
for me.
yeah, I think most people, again, the reason I want to share all this information is because no one sits golfers down when they first take up the game and explain this stuff. Again, it's about when you take up the game, they're going to talk about your grip, your posture, your alignment, and all that stuff, which is very helpful. I'm not against all that information, but no one typically explains to you how to conduct yourself on the golf course and how to react to shots. So for a long time, I was under the impression that to become a better golfer, I had to hit all these miraculous shots and hitting, 5, 10 feet from the pin and making birdies. What I saw on TV was the path to lower scores. And with that, and my friends, we would just be angry at ourselves all the time because we were measuring ourselves against a standard that doesn't even exist. I have a chapter in the book that even goes to PGA Tour players and shows that the broadcasts we see aren't very realistic for even how they play. So I think when we have a basic understanding of what reasonable outcomes are for our skill level and our handicap level, we then start to unwind these reactions. So, as you said, if you had a mid iron from the middle of the fairway and you hit it to 40 feet on the green, or you left yourself a very straightforward chip or pitch shot, some golfers might scoff at that and get angry at themselves, or they hit a wedge from 80 yards to 20 feet, and they're like, "Oh, that was a terrible shot." That instant reaction then carries itself over to the putt or the next tee shot, and they build on one another. So if you can start having more appropriate reactions, um, you're kind of on a longer mental leash. You're not as desperate or angry at yourself for something that you shouldn't even be angry at yourself. And more importantly, as you said, that leads into strategic decisions as well. You start picking smarter targets because you understand what better shots are. And the path to lower scores for a lot of golfers is more bogeys and less doubles and triples and peppering in those stress-free pars. So I'm trying to rewire our brains on what lower scoring actually looks like because our perception of it is usually quite different. And when you don't get those balanced correctly, you go out on the course perpetually disappointed. You don't have fun. You pick bad targets, and generally you shoot higher scores. So they're all linked together.
Mm. It's definitely been something which has helped me drop a few shots. So I do enjoy having the opportunity to personally say thank you. So
Great.
that's been
That's
very, very
wonderful to hear.
useful. The other thing that you talk a little bit about in some of the podcast episodes that I've listened to is the fighting the war against double bogeys, which is a nice phrase. I have to admit, previous round I started double bogey, bogey, double bogey on my first three holes, and after the second one, I was feeling like I'd let you down because I was losing the war against double bogeys at that point.
I
We
lose the
pulled it. We
war
pulled it together.
myself at times.
We pulled it together. It was okay after that. But I guess I'm interested just to delve into that a little bit. Like, what are some of the really solid tips and tricks for winning that war?
Well, first, understanding that, what's the difference between a 10 and a 5 handicap or a 20 and a 15? It's not necessarily, well, it's definitely not birdies. Anyone outside of a scratch golfer is averaging less than one birdie per round. So your scores aren't lowering through birdies. They're spectacular shots. This is the unsexy, boring part of golf that people don't want to think about or admit, but the chance to save a ton of strokes is when you're in those situations where, yeah, you might hit a poor tee shot or you're short-sided on the green or you're in a fairway bunker, and calming yourself down and choosing the safer, let me get out of here quickly rather than trying to do something miraculous.
Mm,
That's one of the situations where people can lower their scores. And it's hard to have that perspective in the moment because we're angry at ourselves. We have a kind of a gambler's mentality to make up for the mistake. So yeah, just understanding that this big separator is the doubles and worse. It's making a lot of good bogeys and stress-free pars when you can. And again, that has implications for your decision making and your mindset. So I think that's a hard truth for a lot of golfers to accept because I've gotten a lot of blowback saying like, well, I like to, go for it and play aggressively. And you can at times if you learn the right rules, but this more methodical, boring approach that's efficient does lead to lower scores. And if you enjoy that and you want to shoot lower scores, you could do that by helping limit the double bogeys. But yeah, it's a combination of smarter targets, emotional control, building your ball striking skills. If you listen to our podcast, we're always talking about the big three: how you strike it on the face, how do you interact with the turf, your face control,
mm,
working on those skills. So it all works together to, again, make more good bogeys and stress-free pars and make a few birdies here and there. But more importantly, the big goal is to limit the big mistakes because those are the ones that obviously make your score go quickly higher, and you can't make enough birdies to counteract it. So that is the truth about scoring that I think a lot of us don't even think about while we're on the course.
mm.
Just
I
just
love that
on
you
the
provide advice. Sorry, Andy Walker, I'll give it to you in a sec. I love that you
yeah,
provide advice to people free of charge. You go, hey, here you go. Here's how you could get better at the game. And because they don't agree with that approach and want to do something else, that they get cranky at you in response. Like, it's just amazing. Human nature.
I think I've pretty much come to the terms with the fact that I'm the guy who's telling people to eat their fruits and vegetables. I don't have anything. I don't have anything miraculous or groundbreaking to say. A lot of the stuff I say is hiding in plain sight. It's stuff people have known about.
Mm,
Um, but like any coach, I'm asking you to buy into this philosophy, and if you do, most people who've bought into it shoot lower scores and enjoy themselves because it's the right thing to do. No different than if someone was listening to, people who give personal finance advice. I mean, there's no secrets there. Have a budget, have a longer term view of the
mm,
markets and low cost index funds, save for retirement, like do all these like methodical small things, and over a long time they compound. Or health advice, eating nutrient dense foods, moving every day, getting good sleep. Like the advice is out there. It's mostly straightforward. I think a lot of people try and complicate it to grow their following, but that's a different story. But I'm just collecting all of this, good advice and trying to give it to you in a package. And that's why I said earlier, when I put it in the book, that's when people started listening to me more. Versus when it was kind of scattered all over a website. When I put it in the book, it was like, okay, here are the sets of rules. I can adopt some of these and I should see good results. But of course, it's golf and anything could happen. So yeah, I think I'm just asking people to be a little bit more disciplined and methodical with their approach to the game if they want to shoot lower scores. And if they don't, if you want to go out there and wing it and that's your version of having fun, don't get stuck in the limbo where you're angry at yourself because you're not shooting your lowest scores, but you're still doing stuff that's preventing you from achieving that goal. That's where golfers get into trouble when they're not honest with what they want out of the game and what their habits are.
Mm.
Yeah, well, I mean, talking about the war on double bogeys, I did play a couple of days ago in a stroke event, and I had a 9 on a par 5, which is actually the second week in a row that I've had a 9 on a par 5. So I'm actually fighting the war against quadruple bogeys at the moment, which I think is a different conversation. But what I really like and what's really helped me on that subject is I was one who, say, when I hit it off the tee into the trees, I would always go for the low percentage hero shot. And just understanding the fact that even on the PGA Tour, I think it's 80% of tour pros still make a bogey when they hit it into the trees. So just getting it back into play. And then when you're hitting into the green, aiming for the middle of the green or a more conservative target, that to me, it's helped me, well, not eliminate double bogeys, certainly not quadruple bogeys, but it's helped me reduce the number of double bogeys, but it's also helped me make more birdies, which I find really interesting because I've got more birdie putts.
Yeah, I think for the more skilled player, as you get better at ball striking and keeping your tee ball in play and giving yourself a chance to hit greens, essentially like the highest level of golf is, most traditional statistics in golf don't really paint a clear picture on your scoring, like fairways hit or putts per round. But greens in regulation, I often tell people, yeah, that's pretty much your scoring potential. So if you want to shoot your lowest scores, you need to build your game around hitting more greens in regulation. And that's, yeah, driving it well and just wearing out greens, which for a lot of people, that's not firing at a tuck pin. That's just saying, how can I take the easy way out here and get the ball on the putting surface? Because your opportunity to post a lower score will increase dramatically at that point. Um, Again, it's doing simple things over and over again. But the challenge of golf is in the moment, we're so distracted. When you're on the course, everyone knows this. Your thoughts are going faster. You've got playing partners. You have the expectations of your score. If you're competing against other people, you're worrying about them. So all of a sudden, in the heat of battle, it's harder to do all these things. And that's why I'm obsessed with making things simple on the golf course and giving people a simple set of rules that they can adhere to no matter what happens. And yes, that could lead to a lot of, for a skilled ball striker, that actually could lead to sometimes 3, 4, 5 birdies around where they're like, man, I didn't do anything spectacular. I just hit a
Mhm.
bunch of solid, tee shots and iron shots, a few putts rolled in, and wow, it didn't feel like it was anything special. It just kind of happened rather than like they were doing something very aggressive
Mm.
and you know otherworldly to make it happen. So the word simple comes up a lot, and I think that's something to work towards on the golf course because most of us go the opposite direction. I did too for a long time, where we try and complicate things.
Mm. The other part of that, and something that's helped my old man who's 83 and still sort of getting around playing off sort of 10 or 11 is taking the yardage to the back of the green. So hitting to the conservative target, but also then taking the yardage to the back of the green, which I think for the average golfer is going to help immensely. So so can you maybe just tell me a little bit about the process around that?
That's quite simple as well. I've since I've started writing about golf, back when I started in 2015, Game Golf was just getting started, which was like one of the first stat tracking companies that could collect data on the golf course. And I remember asking the CEO, I'm like, what's the biggest trend you've seen? And he said exactly what I wanted him to, which was that across all handicap levels, most golfers were missing short of the green, which makes perfect sense. We're not taking enough club. We don't strike it as well as we should. We don't necessarily know our distances at times. We're firing at front pins. There's a number of reasons why golfers do not get the ball on the putting surface. And for most skill levels, yeah, taking more club, which I often encourage people to play with a GPS watch. If you could take a number somewhere between the middle and the back yardage, depending on how the hole is. I understand some golf courses have out of bounds behind the hole, but for the most part, golf course architects know where golfers miss it. Most of the trouble's on the front of the green. There's usually bunkers there. And again, most golfers are like, I'm so worried about hitting it over the green. Are you worried about hitting your irons too well, like flushing it? And again, most golfers don't do that. Even the pros don't do that. So yes, I think, and I've gotten so many messages over the years, and again, I'm not the first person to say this, but the data backs it up as well, is that at least give yourself a chance to hit the green and take more club and see what happens. Prove it to yourself. And for a lot of people, that experiment will lead to maybe a few more greens and regulations per round and a lot of stress-free pars versus not getting on the green. So I often challenge people to do that. And yeah, if you start airmailing it over too many greens, then you can adjust. But I think for the typical golfer, just giving themselves a little more cushion to get the ball on the putting surface can lead to lower scores. It's not complicated. It's just a matter of having that discipline in the round where, oh, you see that front left pin and maybe you're playing well and you're like, oh, I got to make a birdie here to keep it going. And you start playing to that front number and all of a sudden your dispersion starts shifting before the hole versus after it. Little decisions like that do change scoring outcomes.
It's interesting, John, that you talk about wearing a GPS watch. You also talk about knowing your distances. So I, a few years ago now, got on board with the shot scope system of wearing the watch tags in the end of the club. So you gather all the stats. Andy Walker uses the Arcos system, so kind of similar. It's been a game changer in particular, knowing how far you actually hit each club rather than how far you think you hit each club,
Yeah.
and looking at averages, not best hit.
Yep.
Going, oh, that one time where I flushed my 7-iron 160 meters, and now that's how far I think I hit it every time when it's actually 140. So there's that side of it. 100% agree. The other thing though has been, like, I look at a lot of the guys that I play with that will whip out the laser distance finder, and they'll zap the flag, and they'll know exactly the distance to the flag. I'll look at my watch and I'll look at the center, the distance, the center of the green, distance to the back of the green, and I'll pick a club accordingly without really thinking about the flag too much. And that's been a big difference to me and has helped. But I see guys all the time zapping the flag, and it does two things. Whenever there's a front flag, they're picking a club for a front distance. And when there's a side flag and they're zapping it, they're kind of training their mind to think where the flag is and start aiming at them when they really should aim at the center of the green. Just curious, is that sort of something that you've given any thought to, and what are your views on laser rangefinders for, with those issues in mind versus the watches that you talk about?
It's precisely what you said. It's funny if you look at, I've been shown some statistics in the golf industry of like purchasing habits, and rangefinders outsell GPS by tremendous amounts. It's the most predominant distance measuring device option. And I'm not against rangefinders. I use one myself. I cross-reference it with the golf the watch. So again, if it's making you go after tuck pins or choosing clubs that aren't enough, and making you choose bad targets with your iron shots, then yeah, I would tell people it's doing more disservice to your game than help. I'd say for the more skilled golfer, the very low handicap scratch to plus golfer, yes, you could start using that information and adjusting your target a little bit closer to the pin, not on it, But I think as ball striking skill increases, you can make those small adjustments. But for most golfers, 90+%, I think you'll get on fine using the GPS information. There's always this study. I was never able to track it down, but I've seen it so many times where the teaching professional at a club takes away the pins for the day and everyone shoots better than their handicap. And the answer is quite simple. It's like there wasn't this pin tempting them. They just kind of took a conservative target with enough club to get on the putting surface. And if
Yeah,
you
I
can
heard
play
that
that way,
story. I heard that
it's been.
story as well.
I
Yeah,
wish someone could recreate it again, but I've heard it
yeah,
anecdotally from pros. Um, but essentially, I'm asking you to play golf a little bit more like that. Not,
yeah.
it's hard to see that thing sticking out of the ground and assume it's not your target all the time. If it is in the middle of the green or in a big spot, fine, go for it. But yeah, if it's tucked back left, front left, front right, um, again, that miniature adjustment you make closer to it, if it's too close, you're
Mm,
just moving that cone of all your iron shot outcomes to spots you don't want to be in because we're usually thinking about our best result. We're not thinking about what could happen when we choose these targets.
mm.
So yeah, that's why I try and build the case for it in the book. I'm sharing data, anecdotal stories, and just going through the thought process so I can convince, because most people know this. I think most golfers inherently know that they shouldn't be doing stuff like that, but they do it anyway. And they need to be convinced otherwise, again, to eat their fruits and veggies. You need to have a good
Mm.
reason to do it and change your habits. And I try and build that case, and others do as well.
One of the talking about distances, one of the things you talk about in the four foundations of golf is knowing your wedge distances, and that's sort of a weak point, sort of in my game, in that I struggle with my wedge distances. And you talk about where Dustin Johnson went from being close to winning a major to then working on his wedges, and he end up obviously now he's won multiple majors. I've heard different strategies, whether it be a wedge matrix or different things to use. How do you approach knowing your wedge distances and working that out?
Yeah, I think there's a few ways to gather it. I think with modern tech and the launch monitors, even the very low cost launch monitors at this point, those are great ways to kind of start challenging yourself on the range and hitting different numbers, that 40, 60, 80, 75, 65, those awkward wedge distances. We see those a lot on par fives or short par fours, or even in a recovery situation, and you hopefully get it back out on the fairway. So golfers are going to be faced with these shots a lot, and I want you to feel comfortable enough that you can get the ball on the putting surface. And wedge play, these finesse shots, is mostly a contest of distance control. It's not directional. So as we get closer to the green, our left to right dispersion, because of just the physics and geometry of the golf club, um, left and right is not as big of an issue. It's more of a north-south question. So we need to figure out a way to say, I've got a 70-yard wedge shot. Can I hit this somewhere between, I don't know, 60 to 80, something like that, and feel good about that? And as you get better, you can tighten that window. And a lot of that's through practice. Dave Peltz wrote a great book that influenced me called The Short Game Bible, probably, I don't know, 30-ish years ago. And he had a clock system. I kind of modified that. He would say you can arrive at all these distance through three different clubs and four different swing lengths. I use my 60 degree on most of them, and I just feel like the different lengths, or my perceived lengths of my swing, to control distance. So everyone needs to figure out a way to get a little more comfortable on these shots, and most people just don't practice them at all. So if you have access to a simulator or you're at the range, it's a great way to warm up. And you can track, the game tracking systems would be a little harder, just because
Mm.
if you have
Mm.
lob wedge and you're looking at your lob wedge distances, or 56 or whatever you're using for these shots, it's going to show all these different distances. So yeah, going to the range or a simulator with launch monitors at this point is a great way to test yourself. And that's really what Dustin Johnson did. He was hitting all these mammoth drives and couldn't hit a 70-yard wedge shot
Yeah.
70 yards. So he bought a
Mm.
TrackMan specifically for that. And he just kept challenging himself. He's like, can I hit it 78, 64, 65, 52? And I start every warm-up session with those numbers. And you can never get too good at these. I'm struggling with them a little bit lately. They used to be the best part of my game, and I'm going a little backwards, and I'm still working on them. So it's just like a skill that you can never get too good at.
Mhm. Yeah, I haven't made that investment yet to the for the launch monitor. I've looked and I've almost pressed the buy button a couple of times on different models, but I know Steve's got one of the Garmin's which he uses pretty regularly, but yeah, haven't quite
It's
made
pretty
that step
good.
yet.
I don't know. Like I don't have the net set up adequately to be able to do the wedge work on this for the distance because I've got a net to hit into, but it's like 8 foot high. So if I start pumping lob wedges in the garage, I'm going to be putting a lot of
You might
holes in
go over.
the
Well,
drywall.
then you
Um,
need to work on your loft control and getting those hands a little bit further forward at impact.
maybe. Um, but it is a really important one. Although one question that I've been burning to ask you for quite some time is the all of the cliches that you hear about drive for show, putt for dough, or another way of saying it, as a good friend of our show coined it, is short game, short game, short game. So, with the introduction of the strokes gained methodology and understanding a lot more about the value of different shots, if I want to drop shots, obviously without talking about specifically where my deficiencies lie in certain elements of the game, but as a rule of thumb for a golfer, if you want to drop shots, should I be focusing on ball striking or should I be focusing on chipping and putting? Like,
Yeah,
where is the low hanging fruit? Where is the
yeah.
biggest gains to be made?
I'm not a very controversial person. If you follow me on social media, I'm very positive. But the only semi-controversial statement I make is that the people who always tell golfers it's all about your short game. It's usually playing professionals who already have great long games, and they're like, "Oh, I just spend all my time working on my wedges and my putter." I'm like, "Great, that's because you also hit your driver 300 yards pretty straight and flush your irons." So I think it's a little disingenuous to tell other golfers that they should focus only on the short game to lower their scores when they're topping it off the tee and chunking irons. You just can't score that way. And my good friend Mark Brody, who I think the entire golf world should be grateful to for exploring this and his research, showed that yeah, short game's important, but across all levels, 2/3 of scoring differential is accounted for by your tee game and your approach play. More specifically, approach play is where scoring really occurs, not with wedge shots. That's where players separate the most. So I would tell people that if you want to unlock your highest level of golf, yeah, you need to drive it well. And what I mean by driving it well, I don't think you need to hit it 280. I think you need to stand over your driver and keep it in a 60 to 70 yard window and hit it in front of you somewhere so that you have more clear shots to the green. They don't have to all be in the fairway, but keep the ball in play and hit at a reasonable distance. And with your iron play, like, yeah, hitting more greens in regulation, that is how you lower your scores dramatically. So again, as you alluded to, everyone's different. So some people do have decent long games, and a lot of their gains can be made with cleaning up their wedges around the green and reducing three putts. That might be the answer for you. You don't know until you kind of track your stats. But for the most part, you can't get too good at hitting your driver well and your irons well. Like that has been the unlock for me. Getting to a plus handicap. If I drive the ball well and hit my irons well, that
You're going to
that I
play
can
well.
I'm gonna play well.
Mm.
Versus if I don't drive it well and I put myself in the trees or in recovery situations, I just can't make up with that with my wedges too much. It puts way too much pressure on them. So yeah, the stats back it up, and of course it takes time and effort to get there. But if you want to make golf easier for yourself, then yeah, the long game is going to move you forward the most. And I'm not saying to ignore wedges and putting. I just think at some point most people get tapped out. So if you could stand
Mm.
over a wedge shot and feel good about getting it on the green, and you could reduce a lot of your three putts, you've solved a big problem in scoring. You're not going to make as many doubles. And if
Mm.
you keep working on those parts of the game at the expense of your long game, I think the expected return on scoring starts to get tapped out. versus, again, you cannot get too good at driving the ball or hitting your irons well. Like, I think, especially for a tournament golfer, driver is the most important club in the bag. And I'm not saying that just because I want everyone to bash their driver like 330 yards like touring pros, but it's even more important for the average golfer because they just don't hit their irons as well. So you have to advance the ball as far as you can off the tee because you don't want to give yourself a bunch of long iron shots and recovery situations. You just can't recover from those enough.
Yeah, I mean, the maths that we often talk about on this is, say, par 72 golf courses is set up in strokes for, in regulation for 36 putts and 36 general play shots to get you there to your 72. And someone, say, shooting 100, they're not shooting 100 because they make 36 general play shots and they make 64 putts. Like their putts are going to be somewhere around that 36 number, maybe up to, maybe 38, but they're not burning all of their shots by missing putts. And even if they become great putters, they're going to be sinking 40 footers for double bogey. That's got to get
Yeah.
tiresome at some point.
And another kind of myth is, everyone says, you make 36 strokes, so it could be 50% of your score, or whatever it is. You shot 80 and you had 40 putts, so 50% of your scoring was on the putting green. That is totally untrue also. How many of those putts were from 7 inches, 12 inches, 18 inches? What's the worst expected outcome there? You're going to make that 98% of the time, whereas your tee shot or approach shot, you can inflict way more damage. So in a absolute sense, yeah, the strokes count equally, but in terms of their relative importance, the drive on the par five or the par four, the iron shots, those have way more influence on your eventual score because, again, that's the reason you're putting for a double bogey, not because you missed, the prior putt. It's because everything that occurred beforehand in the long game sets you up for that. So that's, again, something that was told to me as a kid and why everyone said short game is so important because most of your shots are occurring inside of 100 yards. That might be true, but they don't have the same influence as the longer shots.
That's a good way of putting
So,
it. Yeah.
and there's so many ways you can put this, but again, if you want to shoot your lowest scores, the needle is going to move the most with your tee and approach game. And again, not to diminish the short game's importance. It is important, but you do have to look at your own game, and you can use, Arcos, ShotScope, many of the other shot tracking systems, and you can get a look at where the boat is leaking the most water. And for some, the good news, it might be 3-putting, and you can clean that up with some speed control work or getting better at green reading. That would be great news because I think those are all within people's control more versus, yeah, it's a harder nut to crack hitting your driver well and your irons well. Like that's longer term, more time commitment. And some people don't have the time to do that, and they have to be okay with that as well. That's where the expectation management comes in. I realize not everyone has 5 hours a week to practice and play twice a week. So we have to be honest with how much time we can increase these ball striking skills. And if we can't, understand that, yeah, it's going to be hard to move from a 15 handicap to a 5.
Talking about practice, one of my favorite sort of subjects, in that I've always been a very big practicer on the range. But the difference between and when I practice, I've mainly done block practice. That's sort of been my sort of bread and butter. But so do you talk about the block practice versus random practice? What's Can you maybe give me a little bit of a understanding as to what you should be focusing on when you're on the range?
I'm all for having intention and collecting feedback when you practice. So the one thing I hope people get out of the book, and I'll give it away for free all the time, is that the number one thing I get asked is, why am I hitting it so well on the range and not on the golf course? I even have had that question from one of the best golfers in the world.
Yeah,
Frustrated by
wow.
that. And so that disconnect will always exist because the range is a consequence free environment. You don't have the same meaning on each shot, but how do we get better at practice? I think whether you are doing repetitive practice, which would be hitting, 10 or 15 7-irons in a row or wedges in a row, can you take a step back and establish your target? Can you have an intention on the shot? Can you go through some type of routine that you would on the golf course? When you hit the shot, can you absorb feedback? How did I strike it on the face? How was my ground contact to the best of your ability on a mat? Where did the ball start in relation to my target? How did it curve through the air? What was the trajectory? So you're absorbing all this feedback, going back and kind of trying to make adjustments. That to me would be a more productive way to practice in a repetitive slash blocked format. I do it myself. I think, and there's been some research to show this, is if you start randomizing things as well, choosing different clubs, choosing different targets, it kind of resets your brain a bit more and puts you in a situation that would be closer to the golf course so that it forces you to go through changing targets and resetting rather than just hitting. The one thing I'm trying to prevent against is what I did for a really long time, which was these zombie range sessions, I refer to them as, where you're just raking through every shot. You're going into a groove that wouldn't exist on the golf course. Eventually, you figure something out on that 20th 7-iron, you flush it, and you're like, oh, I'm good. And then you go to the golf course and you don't hit it like that. And you're like, oh, well, that was so that's why a lot of golfers practice and don't get better, is because they're not doing it properly. They're not engaging themselves. They're not challenging themselves. And there's another option out there with, playing performance games and randomizing or some of the skill-based drills that I talk about in the book. And certainly my podcast co-host Adam Young has, where you're challenging yourself to strike different parts of the face. You're focusing on ground contact exclusively. Can I start the ball to the right of my target, to the left of my target, working on face control? Can I hit a big sweeping draw? Can I hit a big sweeping slice? Not that I want you to do that on the golf course, but that's working on changing your path. So these are all skills that we need on the golf course, because as we know, you get out there and you're pulling all your tee shots or you're chunking all your iron shots and you say, well, how do I fix this? If you practiced that way and worked on those skills in practice, you would know how to open the face open a little bit more. You would know how to move the strike away from the heel closer to the center. And anyone who listens to our show hears us just blast that point home on every episode, because you can never get too good at these things. So, yeah, I think a lot of golfers practice the wrong way and they set themselves up for disappointment on the golf course, because there's this version of them that exists on the range that they cannot recreate on the course. And you're just endlessly frustrated by that.
Yeah, it's a good point. I'm interested listening to you talk about doing, say deliberately hitting sweeping hooks or big curving slices and those sorts of things. And I get the point around, learning how your swing path and your face control and those types of things influence the ball flight. But in your mind, like you hear a lot of people talking about, to get really good at golf, you've got to get good at shaping shots. You've got to move it both ways. You've got to have all these shots in your arsenal. Then there's another school of thought that says just play one shape, get good at one thing. Which side of that fence do you sit on?
So I'm mostly an advocate for the average player. I do coach a PGA Tour player, and he has a similar philosophy on that. Keep it simple. I think there's examples of, players at the highest level like Xander Schauffele and Scheffler who, yeah, they could work the ball in both directions and change trajectory. I think that's a separate conversation. So I think for the quote unquote average player, who again is most golfers,
We're pretty average.
yeah, I'm asking people to work towards simplicity. So my formula would be is I would love for you to explore all those shots in practice to help develop face control and awareness of what the club is doing. So you kind of get outside of the box to make your box better. And if that's a nice little fade or a tight draw, and you can make that shot better, that's what I love people to work toward. So I'm definitely in the camp of keeping it simple, not feeling like you need 7 different shots on the course. I'd prefer you to get really good at one or two things and hang your hat on that. And if you get so good at them and you could add something else, great, do it. And the metaphor I make in the book is that Do you have diners in Australia that have like 100 different dishes? Like diners are huge in America. I
Mm,
don't know if they're as big as okay. So I don't want you to be, you show up to the diner and it's like, wow, I could get 37 different breakfast items or 50 different, lunch things. And you're like, wow, I've got
Mm,
this like thick book of things to choose from. I don't know what I want. And I'm not confident that whatever chef is back there could cook all of these quite well because there's just so many. And I
mm,
think a lot of golfers approach the game like that. They assume that to shoot their lowest scores, they need to fade it to a back right pin because, maybe Jack Nicklaus said that 40 years ago and have a low punch shot into the wind and all these flop shots and low runners with your wedges. And my belief is that if you could be the restaurant that only has three or four or five dishes and you cook them really well and people know when they order them, they're going to get the same quality for the most part. Like that's what you want to aspire to as a golfer. So I'm on camp simple. And
mm,
some people, when they hear me talk about practice, they get confused because I am saying, try all these different shots, but when you get on the course, let's keep it to one or two so that everything's simple. We step up to our iron shots knowing I'm going to hit my stock shot. I step up on the tee knowing I'm going to be doing the same exact thing. I want you to feel like golf is on autopilot as much as possible so that you're not standing behind the ball and you're like, ugh, front left pin, tucked left. Maybe I could draw this in there with a cute little shot or, the wind's coming off the right. So I'm going to hit this nice fade that holds up into the wind. And for the most part, it sounds great in theory, but you're not profiting. You're not going to shoot
mm,
lower scores off of it because you're just going to end up double crossing it or chunking it. So I
mm,
think this is the story we tell ourselves as golfers in a vacuum. But when we're on the course, simple is usually better because it reduces those big mistakes. You might hit that spectacular fade that holds up against the wind 1 out of 10 times, but for every other time you totally pull hook it and miss the green by 40 yards to the left, well, now you've erased all those gains from that one shot. So that's why I believe going towards simple and what's comfortable as best you can will lead to lower scores for most. But yeah, at the highest level of the game, that might be a different story for some.
yeah, I must
love it.
admit, I've become a better golfer through just having a couple of different shots. I mean, I being a right-handed golfer, I hit a right to left draw. I cannot hit a fade. Like I whenever I try and hit a fade, always ends really, really badly. So for me, just hitting my stock standard draw, and if it's a bit windy, I can hit a nice little punch shot under the wind. That's pretty much it. That's what I work my game with, and I find that to be so much better than trying to manufacture all these different shots.
Mm,
Yeah, it just I think a question that I always keep asking myself, this is kind of how I live my life in general, is how can I make things easier on myself and less stressful and more comfortable? Um, I just always have thought that way. And when I looked at golf, I was going in the opposite direction for so long. So yeah, I just want to make things comfortable and simple for myself. And I think that's a great way to play golf. It's more enjoyable. It's less mental fatigue. It leads to better decisions. That's what I try and do for everyone.
Mm. I'm not sure I had the keep my life simple philosophy when I had kids and brought kids into the world. So that has a
no,
tendency not to
that
make your
doesn't
life.
help. I'm loving this philosophy. Like I genuinely love this philosophy, John. It's so good. And I'm just wondering if I missed an opportunity when writing the wedding vows, sort of 16 years ago. If I could have put something in there like, I vow to keep it simple and, maybe got that from both sides of the coin, potentially.
I
Because,
yeah, I think I've I get so much stress and mental fatigue from having too many options. And luckily I have my wife,
totally.
my life partner is on the same page. Like when we were getting married, some people they're like choosing between all these like venues and wedding photographers. We were like, no, we'll choose from one or two or three, keep it simple. I fortunately found someone who lives life the same way, and we try and raise her. It's not easy raising kids. The complication is unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a great book I read a long time ago called The Paradox of Choice. I think it's still relevant to probably even
Yeah.
more relevant to this day because modern society gives us so many options. And it's just about that concept that life's harder when you feel like you have to choose between more things. And man, they just released the iPhone 16. Like, it's just how many different phones can we choose from? Like, every day we're just bombarded by, like, sorry if I'm getting philosophical here, but
No,
like,
that's cool.
we're just getting annihilated by all these options, financial decisions, what you're doing with your day, how you're spending your free time. And it stresses me out. And the only way I can kind of incubate myself from that is trying to go in the simpler path. And I don't always get it right, but I've just found that helps me. And that's kind of like my rallying call. And that's what made me a better golfer. Um, so whether I'm playing match play or a stroke play tournament or whatever the situation, I try and have the same intentions over every shot. If it's on the 18th hole or the first hole, I'm just trying to do the same things over and over again and keep it simple. And that's, again, found me more joy and lower scores. And and just to be honest with everyone, like, I still struggle with these things. I still struggle with looking at the
Yeah.
green, saying, man, I could, thread my wedge over into that little, because I've gotten better as a ball striker. And I'm saying, I could put it a little bit closer over there. And I have to remind myself to listen to my own advice at times. So I'm not perfect and I'm still struggling with this stuff myself. And I think that's what makes golf fascinating is you never truly solve it. It's like a battle against yourself.
Yeah, for sure. You you raised a kind of a bit of a point with that story, which has been something that's been a little bit, I think we mentioned at the beginning, a common thread in this show that a lot of people have resonated with, and that's the struggle for balance. Like we always talk about being super time poor. Like we've got all these goals, we've got these things we're trying to achieve, but we've also got a lot of obligations in life, particularly as as guys in embarking on sort of the middle-aged years. You've got career obligations, you've got family obligations, you've got all sorts of other things pulling you apart. Um, but you still want to try and find time to live out those passions and get, in our case, better at golf, which is a very worthy pursuit, I might add. How do you balance it? Have you got a method? Like how do you go about all those sorts of things? Because I know you face the same challenges we do. Like
Yeah, I mean, I just started a golf business so that I could always make the excuse if I'm playing golf, it's for work. So that
why do
was
you
the
think we're
ultimate
doing
unlock.
this? Like
Yeah.
honestly, why
Well,
do you think we're doing this?
I mean, on a serious note, I actually don't play as much golf as people would assume. Like, I do, this is a business for me. I have a lot of things to
Yeah,
do during the day to keep this business going. Um, I don't think I play. I think if most people would assume like, oh, this guy must play like 100 to 200 times a year. I don't. I think I've logged like 42 or 43 rounds this year so far. Again, I live
it's
in a
pretty good.
climate that I can't play. I live in New York, so um, my golf season doesn't really start till hopefully early to mid-April, and then it's wrapping up sometime in October or November. So we've got this 6 to 8 month window to play most of our golf.
Mm.
And yeah, I think the hard thing to do is if you're not the golfer who can play, I would say once a week is a good starting point. Like if you could practice once a week and play once a week, I think that's a good starting point for the golfer who can have enough time to gather feedback on the course, work on that in practice, and expect some type of improvement. But for me, like when I lived in New York City, I could only play like 10 or 12 times a year. It's just not enough time to be on the golf course and being comfortable and working out all the playing skills that I talk about. So that's where the expectation management part comes in. If you're not playing enough and practicing enough, and you still think that you're going to have these breakthroughs, the game's not going to be fun for you. And that's my number one goal for people. So there was a time in my life where I couldn't do a lot of those things. And I would just go out on the golf course. And eventually I was like, I don't really care what I shoot. I'm just out here to enjoy the day with my buddies. We're getting to see each other, getting to walk around this beautiful golf course. And if I shoot, a score on the higher end of my spectrum, fine. If it's on the lower score, that's exciting, obviously. And I kind of took that philosophy to when I play now. Like I'll give you an example. The other day, I played around and with a friend of mine, and it was he invited me to his golf club, and these two guys, I think one of them had read my book, and they're like, "Oh, this is gonna be a great match with Jon," and he's a good golfer, and they're good golfers. I just didn't play well,
Mm.
and I'm still dealing, I talk a lot about worrying about what other golfers think of you. Like now I'm worrying about what other people think of me because they maybe read my book and I'm like, I got
Yeah.
all this stuff to worry about. So I just
Yeah.
didn't play well, but we had a
Yeah.
blast. It rained on
Yeah.
us. We had a good time. And would I have liked to play better? Yeah. Was I a little embarrassed that I hit a few thin and wedge shots and stuff like that? Yeah, but I got through it. And that's what I'm trying to hold myself accountable to that stuff still is that can I still have a good day out there if I didn't shoot the score I'm happy with, or maybe hit a few shots that were embarrassing in my head? And that's hard to do in this game because again, you have that voice in your head saying like you suck, like you can't do the things that you're telling other people to do. So I'm dealing with all this crazy stuff in my head as well, and I just try and be honest about it to let people know that they're not alone when they worry about stuff as well. Sorry, I kind of tailed off there on that topic.
That's cool.
Well, one of the things that we've been talking about it the last couple of weeks is we're coming into our warmer weather into our
Yeah.
summer, so we're
Yeah,
looking
yeah.
forward to longer days and warmer days and having more time to practice. Where you're sort of winding down, sort of coming into the end of your golf season. So how do you manage that? Because we're lucky in the weather we can play all year round. Yeah, it gets a bit chilly, but we can still get out and play.
Yep.
How do you manage, that weather where you actually can't get out and play?
I listen, I'm fortunate. I've always been able when we moved into our house 10 years ago, I had enough space in the basement or elsewhere to hit balls into a net. I've now have a simulator set up at home. So, the standard I want to play and play well in tournaments, I'm practicing and hitting balls year round. Do I sit there and grind for 90 minutes a day? No, but in the off season, like I'm trying to hit for 10 or 15 minutes every day. Unfortunately, this last off season, I've had some elbow issues. I have tendinosis, tennis elbow,
Mm.
and it's still an issue for me. And I can't hit as many balls as I want to. And I think it's shown up in my ball striking this year. It just hasn't been as sharp. So yeah, the standard that I want to play at, I want to play well in tournaments. I want to, win club championships and maintain my handicap level. Like, yeah, I put in the work. I
Mm.
try and keep my game fresh in the off season. I don't put the clubs away for 4 or 5 months. And this is again a situation where everyone needs to be honest with their effort level. Do they have access to hit balls? Some people live in like apartment buildings or they don't have space in their house to hit balls. If that's the case, then you have to be more patient with yourself when the cobwebs come off the clubs in the spring. So yeah, you have to evaluate your situation and see, can I use the off season to maybe work on some parts of my game that I felt were deficient during the season? Can you get swing lessons? That's the time of the year where I'm making adjustments and trying to make a big change because I don't want to do it in season. And we've
Mm.
definitely tackled this topic on our podcast, but I understand that everyone can't do that. So in a perfect world, yeah, I would use the off season to work on my body. I invest more in weight training and mobility work. If I'm going to make a change, if I felt like, man, my something was really bothering me this year for a while was my driver. I'm going to put a lot of intense work on my driver on the launch monitor, which I did for 3 or 4 years. That really helped me. So in a perfect world, yeah, the off season's like work on the body, work on a big problem in your game, maybe get swing lessons. You can change equipment, and then marry that against your budget, your opportunities to do that. Because again, everyone has a different situation there. And
Mm.
that's how I have been able to keep my game fresh when the spring starts. I don't feel like I'm coming off this big hiatus because I've been hitting balls a lot.
Mm. And it sounds like the simulator setup that was purely for business purposes and business research.
Of course, yeah. That was
Complete tax write-off.
again,
Yeah.
again, yeah. I mean, 10 years doing this, grinding at it, and there were some perks that came in the end. So yeah, I do. For a long
Excellent.
time, I was just hitting into a budget net in my unfinished basement, breaking some lights, hitting the 2x4s in the ceiling. But I was spraying the
That's where
face,
we're at.
grinding on my
Yeah.
contact, and that helped me. That helped me get
Mm.
to where I am with my ball striking and being able to access the center of the face more often. So again, you can figure out creative ways to practice and focus on those impact fundamentals and get better at them. Is your situation going to be perfect? No, but you do the best with what you got.
Mm. You talked a
We
little bit about nutrition and fitness there as well. That's what you work on in the off season. How important do you see that in sort of the I guess the full picture of playing good golf?
I it's the most important thing to me, period, in life. I'm 41. I was fortunate. My parents both took fitness seriously when they both turned 50. They started lifting weights. Unfortunately, my mother was had some health concerns around diabetes. She got it later in life and eventually was diagnosed as a type 1. Bit of a strange situation, but when she went through that transformation and the diet and fitness to keep herself healthy, the rest of the family kind of adopted that. So health and fitness has always been important to me. And as I get older and get these little creaks in my body, I want to make sure that I can play golf for a long time. I'm living as pain-free as I can. So yeah, in the off season, I'm lifting weights 3 to 4 times a week. I don't think golfers should be afraid of lifting weights. I think it'll make
Mm,
you have more control over your body. It'll reduce injury. You can hit the ball farther. I definitely do mobility work, loosening my hips, just making sure everything's moving properly. So I do that just because I want to do that in life. I just want to it makes me feel good, makes me feel productive, makes my body feel better. I want to be healthy for my kids and my wife. So yeah, I do those things for that reason. And then there's a lot of tangible benefits in my golf game. I'm 5'8" and 150 pounds and 41, but I can still hit my driver 280, 300 because I can still generate the swing speed through my strength and range of motion. And I feel like a lot of I've had this elbow injury. That's really the only injury I've ever had. So I've been fortunate on that front. I don't know if that's all
mm,
because of the fitness, but I think it gives you a better chance.
mm,
So yeah, I love for golfers to kill two birds with one stone. And I'm a huge proponent of taking the fitness part seriously because it can and will lower your handicap, but more importantly, like it's going to improve the quality of your life and you'll
yep.
likely live longer too.
Mm,
So it's a great, I put in the book, I'm like, I can't think of a better investment of your time if you've got it in the
mm,
off season and during the season too.
mm,
as I'm sure you've been listening to our recent episodes, John, you would have heard the storyline of a few injuries being creeping into our circa
mm,
50-year-old bodies. And I can tell you at 41, the creaks that I feel around the 17th, 18th hole or in the morning crawling out of bed, the difference between 41 and nearly
I know it's
50.
coming. Yeah, yeah. I know it's coming.
But it's so true. Like just doing it, we talk about this quite a lot, is it doesn't need to be a huge thing. You don't need to be Arnie Schwarzenegger or anything, but doing
No, no.
some flexibility work and a little bit of weight resistance work, it's just so important. So important.
There's no better investment in your time. If you lifted weights in some type of like miniature full body workout 3 times a week for 20 to 25 minutes and did that over a period of a year, your body will go through an incredible transformation. Or
Mm.
if you did 5 minutes of mobility work, like sometimes I get lazy with that. I'm now doing it with my son when he wakes up in the morning, like just doing some stuff on the hips, doing some lunges, some push-ups, some other movements. This stuff compounds over time. And yeah, I know as I get older, things are going to get worse. I saw some recent study that like they now believe we go through like two major aging processes. Is like one is 44 and the other is like 63 for most people, where like all of a sudden like your body just dramatically changes.
mm,
And yeah, maybe
I'd say it's true.
this elbow thing I'm dealing with is a sign of things to come, but I'll do my best to control what I can with the fitness work because I know it's going to make whatever process I go through a little less worse. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I
Um,
mean, look, we both walk the course as well whenever we play, so
yeah, walking's huge.
we're
So do
big
I.
proponents for that. Absolutely.
I think
I'm
walking
mindful
is
of
the
yeah,
number one thing you could do. I walk every day with my wife for 45
yeah, that's
minutes. Like
good.
it's a great, great, great habit in life.
I'm mindful of time because we're keeping you longer than we promised, but I do have another little question that I need to ask you, and that is we haven't touched on tournament play, John.
Hmm.
You're a bit of an expert in this field. Not only do you play tournaments yourself, you coach a PGA Tour professional. So you've got to know something about getting it around in a tournament. We've got a few coming up. Andy Walker's in the midst of a few at the moment. I'm hoping to get into the New South Wales Country Championships in a month or so, which for me will be a bit of a big deal. We've teed it up in some tournaments. We're not complete novices, but if you were to say, this is what you need to do for success in tournament play. And I know this could be an episode on its own, but like, what's the
I mean,
highlights package?
It could
the
be a
nuts
book.
and bolts. Yeah,
Here it
so
is. Here's the
I,
one he wrote earlier.
yeah, I'm a bit of a guinea pig, and I don't want people to think like I'm some tremendous tournament player that's winning all these tournaments. So I came as somewhat of a late bloomer and not very experienced and wasn't a great junior golfer to, yeah, I think over the last 10 years, I've become a fairly good mid-amateur player. I've played well over, I don't know, a couple hundred rounds under pressure with, counting every stroke and going through that process. I've been fortunate to play in a USGA event, a lot of great regional tournaments in my area, the New York metro area. We have a wonderful governing body called the Metropolitan Golf Association. We play a lot of big time tournaments. So yeah, I've gone through the process of learning and failing and succumbing to pressure to getting more comfortable with it and still figuring that out and having moments on the course that are just dumbfounding and embarrassing and all that stuff. And I think for golfers who are starting to get into competitive golf or getting back into it after a long hiatus, they have to be open to all the things that are going to happen because it's a much different environment than anyone can imagine. It looks the same, but you are totally different. And the hardest part is being open to, yeah, having blow up holes and posting a number that's way higher than your average score would be and having a mindset that you're out there to learn in the beginning and experience these things and get more comfortable. Because what most people do is they let the results dictate how they feel about themselves and they don't learn and things just get worse. So I would tell most people that, competitive golf's not for everyone. And you could do small doses of it, match play with your buddies, club competitions. But we all have these fears of embarrassment, these vanity things, worrying about what others think of us on the golf course. And it's just so magnified in a competitive context, especially when you play in stroke play events. You feel like you're on an island out there and you have to develop a mental process and a comfort level and an ability to withstand these moments where things are really going against you. And that comes only through experience. I had a buddy who messaged me who I play a lot with in Scotland. He's a teaching professional and his handicap's like a +3 or +4 now. It's really good. I just played with him for about 10 days and his game is just really sharp. And if you played with him, you're like, wow, this guy's incredible. And he messaged me, he's like, I really don't play in many tournaments, but when I do, my game crumbles. And that just shows you, again, they're two different environments and you have to respect them as such. And I try and outline what I think are best practices in the new book. And it's really geared towards, yeah, club level players, people trying to dip their toes in tournament golf. I'm fortunate that I've gotten to work with Mackenzie Hughes the last year plus, and hold him accountable to a lot of these habits when he's on the PGA Tour. He just got picked for the President's Cup team, which is a
I read
really
that
big
today.
deal.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
really exciting moment for him and a lot of the work we've done together. And it's funny, even at his level, he's struggling with a lot of the same things that we all do. He's just way better and he's playing for a lot more money. And we're just
Yeah.
trying to get him to a place where he has a high level of acceptance. He's controlling his effort level. He's not getting down on himself. And he's kind of sticking within this small little bubble that we hold him accountable to. And it's hard. You never solve it. And I enjoy that challenge as poorly as I've felt in those moments at times. And yeah, that's a bit of a hard summary to do, but just understanding that it's a much different environment and what you've done in your quote unquote normal rounds will not necessarily apply. You have to climb the same ladder you would have as reducing your handicap and being comfortable in a normal round of golf. Like you have to go through that same process in a competitive context.
Mm.
Yeah, look, I mean, having read the Foundations of Winning Golf, there's a couple of sentences that you've got in there, which and I won't sort of read it verbatim, but it talks about that competitive golf is a personal growth and development sort of journey, and you're a better father and husband as and person as a result of it, because all your fears are hiding in the trees and in the bunkers and all the rest. Like I read those few sentences and it was just like, wow, that just hits it the nail right on the head when it comes to competitive golf, because golf's a great game in and of itself, going out with your buddies and getting to know your playing partners and the rest, but then putting yourself into that environment of competitive golf, you're right, it's just completely different.
Yeah, when you do hard things in life in general, like you put yourself through discomfort, you set these new reference points. So I believe that competitive golf can be a great, personal development journey in life. And also, I think one of the great things I've got from putting myself under that pressure and dealing with what happens is that, normal rounds of golf don't feel as daunting anymore.
Mm.
I'm
Yeah,
more at peace with, not hitting not
Definitely.
not first tee jitters or just going out there. So when you change the reference point, this is a conversation I recently had with Mackenzie, is he's about to play in the President's Cup, which is going to be a level of pressure in the crowd, and he's playing in front of his home crowd in Canada.
mm,
It's going to be absolutely wild. And I'm excited for him to go through that, win or lose, because now we can use this to his advantage as he goes into the next season on the PGA Tour, because nothing he's ever experienced is going to be like that. And if he can get through that, if he can hold himself accountable and follow through on the standards that we're setting for him, whether he wins the matches, loses them, and he follows through on that stuff, man, I love how that's going to pay off next year. And that's what a lot of it is about, and why it's a personal development journey, is you're taking these moments, trying to control what you can and learning, and you're looking at it on the long term versus the short term. And that's what I think really good competitive golfers have figured out. And I'm still learning myself. Again, I'm not trying to make it seem like I'm, you said expert. I still feel like I've got a lot to learn. Um, and you can only learn that by putting yourself through this discomfort, and hopefully I find a lot of joy in playing in these tournaments in the moments where like things go well, and I can, and more importantly, when they don't go well and I can pull myself out of it. I have a lot of pride and joy in those moments as well.
mm,
Absolutely. And I think, for us, with where we're at with the tournament preparation that's coming up, the big one for us is going to be in March next year, which will be the New South Wales Senior Amateur Championships. And hopefully we get in. Hopefully we give a decent account of ourselves. I have to turn 50 first, John, to qualify. That's the thing that's holding me back.
There.
But I think that's amazing advice, and I'm mindful we've had you now for nearly an hour and a quarter, so we absolutely appreciate your time. I just feel like this is a conversation that could go on for days. So we'd love to have you back on the show at some point in the future. I think the Pilgrims are going to love hearing the stories that you've had for us in this episode, and we thoroughly appreciate it. We will put all of the details of your book, your website, etc., in the show notes. But in your own words, where can people find you? What can they? How can they interact with you? What can they buy from you? This is the sales pitch part of the show for you.
Sure. I mean, I try to be generous. I give a lot of information away for free. So I'm probably most active on, I still call it Twitter, but you can follow me there at Practical Golf. I think it's at practical.golf on Instagram. Yeah, we have the podcast, The Sweet Spot, that I co-host with Adam. I think we have over 140 episodes in the library of a lot of this information. Best way you can support me is buy my books on Amazon, The Four Foundations of Golf and The Foundations of Winning Golf. Fortunately, Amazon makes that easy to do no matter where you live in the world. My website, practical-golf.com. And yeah, I have a weekly newsletter. So yeah, any of those sources, you can get some free stuff from me, and you can check out. I do have a website for the book. the 4foundationsofgolf.com, and there's a video course on there. So yeah, I'm trying to put together all this information in a way that's easily digestible for players of all levels, and just know that the guy behind it is a golfer too, who I figured some stuff out, but I'm still figuring it out myself. And hopefully that resonates with people who interact with my content.
Amazing. Andy Walker, have you got any final words for our illustrious guest?
Look, I really just thanking you for getting this information out there, John, because it's helped me enormously in my own awareness. As
Yeah.
I said sort of earlier, it was the start of my journey really into this phase of my life and understanding sort of the modern game from where I was 30 years ago to where I want to be now. So, to have, this information, this wasn't available when I was playing in the sort of early to mid 90s. So to have this available and to have that to be able to gain that awareness through this information is phenomenal. So yeah, appreciate your time being on the show, but also getting this information out there.
Thank you. That's very rewarding for me to hear, and I appreciate that. And then thanks for all of your mentions on the show and having me on. Still kind of strange to me that you put something out in the world. I'm in my basement right now in my office. This is where I do the podcast. This is where I wrote the book, and it's just crazy with the internet and everything. This the information has gone all over the world, and it's still crazy to me. But that's really rewarding to hear, and thank you for saying that.
No, it's amazing. We really appreciate it. And on behalf of all the pilgrims, thank you for coming on and being so generous with your time and all your information. So, Jon Sherman, thank you very much for joining us on the Missing Links Golf Show.
All right. Thank you.
Andy Walker, how about that?
That was a phenomenal chat. I mean, what a genuine guy who just wants to help other golfers, and puts quite a lot of info, because I've seen quite a bit of his information now, and does share an enormous amount of information on through his websites, through his podcasts, through his social channels, just aimed at helping golfers like us.
It's unreal. I mean, every time we have one of these fantastic guests on the show, I am blown away by the generosity of spirit that they are just so happy to share what is essentially their IP, hard-earned IP,
Yeah.
and share it with us and all the pilgrims free of charge, simply because they are nice people. I just feel like, I don't know if it's a golf thing, but I feel like maybe it is. There's just this absolute desire to help each other that you don't come across in many other pursuits. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think golf's one of those games that because it's
so hard.
well, and success is fleeting.
Yeah.
And we've talked about it before, that, and I think even John talks about it, that good golf isn't that far away. But when you're playing good golf, bad golf isn't that far away.
Isn't that far away? Yeah.
Either. So it's just, it can come and go even throughout a round of golf. Like, you're playing phenomenally well. And then all of a sudden, like I did the other day, I had 9 on a par 5. Like, it's just,
It can happen.
and it just comes out of nowhere, and we're all on that common pilgrimage. We all go through those times of highs and lows, and the roller coaster that is this great game of golf.
Well said, Andy Walker. I think there's a lot to unpack in that interview. There was a lot of really, really good information. Good stuff about how to practice.
Yeah.
Great stuff about, obviously expectation management, course management. We didn't get too deep into the concepts, of acceptance, which I know is one of Jon's, really big topics that he talks a lot about. But I feel like this is someone we're going to have to get back on the show in, over the next 12 months, and
yeah, for sure,
probably unpack a few other concepts as well, because just such a wealth of knowledge. Super nice guy, very humble. but very
I
generous.
reckon we need to encourage him to get out here to Australia to play golf, and
He
maybe
did.
even
He did
maybe
say that he
even
might do that.
a live interview where we all get together and do a pod
Oh,
together. How good would that be?
that would be amazing after a round of golf that we all play, which I've got to admit, I'd be a bit nervous playing golf in front of someone like Jon Sherman,
Yeah, I can understand that. Me too.
but but that's cool. No, I loved it. That was a lot of fun. Really respect the two books that he's written. And I think, we both talked about it, the Four Foundations of Golf, which was his first book. Um, that I've said for a long time is probably one of the best golf books that has ever been written. So,
For sure.
I
For
think
sure.
that's well worth a
And
read for
if
anyone that hasn't.
yeah, if any of the pilgrims hasn't got a copy of the Four Foundations of Golf, just do yourself a favor. Go and get it and
Absolutely.
just read it. It just gives you a whole new perspective on your own personal pilgrimage and your own personal engagement with the game of golf. It does.
No, I absolutely agree. We will drop the links to John's website, which will have all the information on where to buy his books and how to engage in his courses and various other things. We'll put all that in the show notes. So feel free to click on the link. Obviously, also in the show notes is the opportunity to send us a text message, Andy Walker. People can do that.
They can.
Be great to hear from the pilgrims. On that matter, I did not mention this at the in the opening, but there was some feedback that came from one of a well-known pilgrim. Let me just see if I can get this up right here.
Flying by the seat of our pants now, aren't we?
Yeah, we really are. This is champagne podcasting, ladies and gentlemen. But what was interesting is off the back of the previous episode about now 2 episodes ago, about the Glenmore seniors.
Yes.
Friend of the show, Sandy Wedge, jumped online and had a bit to say, as a matter of fact, Andy Walker.
Do
He
I
said,
want
great.
to hear?
He said,
Do I
great
want to hear?
episode, gents.
Yeah.
What a roller coaster of a round for Andy Walker. Although I must say, that is a penalty shot every day of the week for mine.
Mm.
Seems more P. Reed than Sahith Theegala, in my opinion.
Mm. Well, given that I actually did get a rules official who, has some skills and knowledge and expertise on the matter, rather than someone who has expertise in just fluff and alternative facts, then I I think I'm pretty comfortable with what the end decision was.
Given the sprays that you provide to Sandy Wedge, is there any surprise that he takes you to task like this? I feel like what he's insinuating with his remark about more P. Reed than Sahith Theegala
Mm.
is that similar to what you've done in this situation, P. Reed generally will get a rules official to come over and agree with him once he gives his version of events, and
Mm.
will then turn around and say, well, the rules official said it was fine, so it's fine.
Well, I mean, the fact is that I was in the hazard by myself with no television cameras around, and
So anything could have happened.
so I volunteered the information to my playing partners.
Yeah.
So is that really more P.
But
Reed?
they're not
Wouldn't you have
they're not
thought
my
that
words. They're not my
wouldn't you
words.
have
They're
thought
Sandy's words.
P. Reed would have just like not mentioned anything?
You probably would have taken the ball off the stick.
So, you know,
Anyway, bit of controversy there, Andy
I,
Walker. So,
I think my comment stands.
ladies and gentlemen, it's been a lot of fun. Don't let Sandy Wedge derail what has otherwise been a fantastic episode.
Mm,
But I'm sure that conversation will continue in the future in
I'm
some
sure
way,
it will.
shape, or form.
Mm,
But I think that's about it for this evening. It's been a great episode. Really
yep.
enjoyed it. Can't wait to listen to that probably a few times once again, just to pick all the pearls of wisdom from Jon Sherman. Um, great guy, great guest,
Mm,
and now
100%.
officially a pilgrim.
Friend of the show.
It's great. Any final words, Andy Walker?
Rock out, pilgrims.